They mocked my fake job until I pulled the files and issued an ultimatum. Apologize publicly, face inspection, or watch your world crumble. She froze. The call came at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, just as I was reviewing quarterly reports for my investment portfolio. Sarah's shrill voice cut through the speaker like nails on a chalkboard, each word dripping with the kind of venom that only family members can truly master. Marcus, we need to talk about your pathetic little contribution to Emma's wedding fund. My sister-in-law's tone carried that familiar condescension I'd grown accustomed to over the past 5 years. $2,000? Really? That's what you call family support? I set down my pen carefully, watching the numbers blur on the financial statements spread across my mahogany desk. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I sat in my home office, surrounded by evidence of decades of careful investing and strategic business decisions, while Sarah questioned my generosity from her cramped studio apartment above the downtown Marriott where she worked as a front desk manager. Sarah, I thought $2,000 was generous for a niece I see maybe twice a year, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the familiar knot forming in my stomach. Generous? Her laugh was sharp, bitter. Marcus, let me explain something to you since you clearly don't understand how real families work. Emma is your brother's daughter, your only brother, in case you forgot. She's getting married once, hopefully, and this is supposed to be the most important day of her life. I could hear David in the background, my younger brother's voice, a mumbled protest that Sarah quickly silenced with what sounded like a sharp elbow to the ribs. The venue alone costs $8,000, Sarah continued, her voice rising with each syllable. The dress is $3,000. The flowers, the photographer, the catering, it all adds up to real money. Money that people with actual jobs and actual responsibilities understand. There it was, the dig I'd been waiting for. Sarah had never quite forgiven me for retiring early at 52, 3 years ago, after selling my software consulting firm for what she considered an embarrassingly modest sum. Modest, of course, being her word for the 7-figure exit that had set me up for life. I have a job, Sarah. I manage my investments full-time. It's actually quite demanding when you're dealing with multiple portfolios and real estate holdings across 4 states. Playing with your computer all day isn't a real job, Marcus. Her voice took on that patronizing tone she reserved for explaining things to people she considered intellectually inferior. David works 60 hours a week at the construction site. I work double shifts at the hotel just to make ends meet. We don't have the luxury of sitting around in our pajamas, clicking buttons on some app, pretending we're important. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Through my office window, I could see the lights of downtown Minneapolis twinkling in the distance, each one representing businesses and lives and dreams that Sarah couldn't begin to comprehend. You think I'm broke, don't you? The words came out quieter than I intended, but they carried weight that surprised even me. Broke? Sarah's laugh was genuinely amused now. Marcus, sweetie, you're not broke. Broke people don't live in nice houses or drive decent cars. You're something worse than broke. You're cheap, you're selfish, you have money, but you're too petty and self-centered to share it with the people who actually matter. Something cold settled in my chest, replacing the familiar irritation with something sharper and more focused. I'd spent 3 years listening to Sarah's commentary on my lifestyle, my career choices, my apparent lack of contribution to family events and celebrations. 3 years of biting my tongue while she explained to anyone who would listen that I was living off savings and investments like some kind of financial parasite. You want to know what I think, Marcus? She wasn't finished. I think you're scared. I think you know that money won't last forever, so you're hoarding it like some kind of dragon sitting on a pile of gold. Real men take care of their families. Real men step up when it matters. David's voice came through more clearly now, probably having wrestled the phone away from his wife. Marcus, look, you don't have to listen to this. Sarah's just stressed about the wedding costs and... No, David, Sarah's voice cut through his attempted mediation. He needs to hear this. Marcus, you live in that big, empty house all by yourself. No wife, no kids, no real responsibilities. The least you could do is help Emma have the wedding she deserves instead of throwing us scraps like we're some kind of charity case. I stood up slowly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city I'd helped build through decades of strategic investments in local development projects. Below me, the Marriott's neon sign flickered against the night sky, casting red and blue shadows across the empty streets. "Which Marriott do you work at, Sarah?" My voice was calm now, almost conversational. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just curious. You've mentioned it before, but I can't remember which location." "The downtown one, the big one on Nicollet Mall. Why?" I smiled, though neither of them could see it through the phone. "No particular reason. Just making conversation." "Don't try to change the subject, Marcus. We're talking about your contribution to Emma's future, not my job. Though speaking of jobs, maybe you should consider getting one. A real one this time, where you actually contribute something to society instead of just shuffling money around like some kind of financial vulture." The irony was exquisite. Sarah had no idea that I owned a controlling stake in the investment group that had purchased the downtown Minneapolis Marriott 18 months ago as part of a larger hospitality portfolio acquisition. She had no clue that her paychecks ultimately came from the same financial vulture she was currently lecturing about responsibility and contribution. "You know what, Sarah? You're absolutely right." I settled back into my leather chair, opening my laptop with one hand while holding the phone with the other. "I've been selfish. I've been thinking too small." "Finally," she said, satisfaction creeping into her voice. "So what are you thinking? 5,000? 10? Emma really deserves something special, and David and I are already stretched so thin with the wedding expenses." I pulled up my investment portfolio, scrolling through the hospitality holdings until I found the Marriott documentation. Property value, operational reports, management contracts, staffing records. Everything I needed to make an informed decision about my next move. "Actually, I'm thinking much bigger than $10,000, Sarah." "Really?" Her voice brightened with genuine surprise and what might have been the first note of respect she'd shown me in years. "How much bigger are we talking?" I clicked through to the property management interface, reviewing the organizational chart until I found what I was looking for. Sarah Mitchell, front desk manager, employee ID 4471, hired March 15, 2019, annual salary $42,000, performance reviews, adequate, customer satisfaction scores, below average. "I'm thinking about $27 million. The silence on the other end of the line was so complete, I thought the call might have dropped. "What did you say?" David's voice came through, confused and cautious. $27 million. That's roughly what I paid for my stake in the investment group that owns the Marriott where Sarah works. Another silence, longer this time. "That's not funny, Marcus." Sarah's voice had lost its earlier confidence. "Making up numbers to try to impress us isn't going to change the fact that you're being cheap about Emma's wedding." "I'm not making up anything, Sarah. Would you like me to email you the purchase documents? Or maybe you'd prefer to see the quarterly operational reports that show exactly how much profit your hotel generates? I get those every 3 months, along with detailed staffing reports and performance evaluations." I could hear Sarah breathing heavily, the sound of someone whose worldview was shifting in real time. "You're lying." "Am I? Tell me, Sarah, how much do you know about Pinnacle Investment Holdings? They're the company that acquired your hotel from the previous ownership group last year. There was a whole ceremony, remember? New management, new policies, new employee handbook." The breathing got heavier. "I'm the principal investor in Pinnacle, Sarah, which means, in a very real sense, I'm your boss. Have been for over a year now." "That's impossible." But her voice was smaller now, uncertain. "Is it? You've been complaining for 3 years about how I don't have a real job, how I just sit around clicking buttons on apps, shuffling money around like a financial vulture? Well, congratulations. You finally figured out what I actually do for a living." I pulled up Sarah's employee file, scanning through her recent performance reviews and customer feedback reports. The picture they painted wasn't particularly flattering. "You know what's interesting, Sarah? According to the management reports I receive, your customer satisfaction scores are consistently below hotel standards. Apparently, guests frequently complain about attitude problems and unprofessional behavior at the front desk." "Marcus, please," David's voice now, desperate and apologetic. "Sarah didn't mean any of those things she said. She's just stressed about the wedding, and money's been tight and—" "Oh, I think she meant every word, David. In fact, I think this conversation has been incredibly enlightening for all of us." I minimized the employee records and opened a new browser tab, navigating to the hotel's management portal. With a few clicks, I could access everything from shift schedules to disciplinary records to termination procedures. "Sarah, are you still there?" "I'm here." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Good. Because I want to make sure you understand something very clearly. You spent the last 20 minutes explaining to me how I don't contribute to society, how I don't have real responsibilities, how I'm basically a useless parasite living off money I didn't earn." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle between us. "But here's what you didn't know. Every paycheck you've received for the past 18 months came from companies I own. Every benefit, every paid vacation day, every dollar you've earned to help pay for Emma's wedding, it all traced back to investments I made and businesses I helped acquire." The silence was deafening. "So when you call me cheap, when you call me selfish, when you suggest that I don't understand real work or real responsibility, you're not just insulting me, Sarah. You're insulting your own employer." I could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath through the phone, followed by what sounded like fumbling as she probably grabbed the device from David's hands. "Bacher. Marcus, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here." Her voice had completely transformed, the earlier venom replaced by something that might have been panic masquerading as diplomacy. "I was just trying to motivate you to be more involved with family events. You know how emotional I get about Emma's big day. Misunderstanding?" I leaned back in my chair, genuinely curious about how she planned to navigate this particular minefield. "Which part did I misunderstand, Sarah? The part where you called me a financial vulture, or the part where you said I don't contribute anything to society?" "I was speaking metaphorically. Just expressing frustration about wedding costs. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're under pressure." The backpedaling was almost impressive in its desperation. I opened another browser tab and navigated to the hotel's current employee handbook, scrolling through the sections on professional conduct and grounds for disciplinary action. "That's fascinating, Sarah, because it didn't sound metaphorical at all. In fact, you were quite specific about my character defects and professional inadequacies." David's voice came through again, strained and cautious. "Marcus, look, we're all family here. Can't we just chalk this up to a heated moment and move forward?" Family? I repeated the word slowly, tasting its bitter irony. "Yes, let's talk about family, David. How long have you known that Sarah regularly refers to me as a deadbeat to your co-workers? How long have you been listening to her tell people at Emma's school events that I'm basically unemployed and living off inheritance money?" The silence told me everything I needed to know. Because according to my property managers, Sarah's been quite vocal about her opinions regarding my lifestyle and work ethic. Apparently, she shared her theories about my financial situation with several hotel guests over the past few months. "That's not true," Sarah protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? Because I have customer feedback forms that specifically mention conversations with front desk staff about local family members who don't work real jobs. The descriptions are quite detailed, Sarah, right down to the big empty house and the expensive car that someone apparently can't afford." I minimized the customer feedback reports and opened the hotel's social media monitoring dashboard. The things you could learn about your employees through their online presence never cease to amaze me. You know what's particularly interesting? Your Facebook posts from Emma's birthday party last month, the ones where you complained about family members who show up to events but never contribute meaningfully to family celebrations. "Marcus, please." Sarah's voice was getting smaller with each revelation. "I never mentioned you by name." "You didn't have to. The context was pretty clear, especially when you tagged David and Emma in the post, along with your commentary about people who think clicking buttons on computers qualifies as employment." I could hear muffled conversation in the background, David probably trying to coach Sarah through damage control while she realized the scope of her miscalculation. "But here's what I find most fascinating about this whole situation," I continued, pulling up the hotel's quarterly profit reports. "You've spent 3 years criticizing my work ethic and contribution to society while simultaneously benefiting directly from the success of that work. I don't understand what you mean." "The hotel where you work, Sarah, the one that provides your paycheck and health insurance and paid vacation days. It's profitable because of strategic investments and operational improvements that I helped implement. Every dollar you've earned there is connected to the kind of financial management you've been mocking. I scrolled through the operational efficiency reports, noting the improvements in occupancy rates and customer satisfaction scores since the acquisition. Well, customer satisfaction everywhere except the front desk. When we acquired the property, occupancy was running at 68%. Guest satisfaction scores were mediocre. The previous management was bleeding money through inefficient operations and deferred maintenance. I wouldn't know anything about that, Sarah said quietly. Of course you wouldn't, because understanding business operations requires the kind of strategic thinking you've been telling people I'm incapable of. I opened the capital improvement spreadsheet, reviewing the millions of dollars invested in renovations and system upgrades over the past 18 months. We invested $4.2 million in property improvements, new carpeting, updated fixtures, modernized booking systems, enhanced security protocols. All of that work created temporary disruption for staff, but it increased property values and guest satisfaction scores. The renovations were nice, David offered weakly, probably hoping to steer the conversation toward neutral territory. They were necessary, I corrected, and expensive. The kind of expense that only makes sense when you understand long-term investment strategies and market positioning. I minimized the capital improvements data and pulled up employee performance metrics, focusing specifically on customer interaction scores. But here's what's particularly troubling, Sarah. While the hotel's overall performance has improved dramatically since the acquisition, there's one area where we're still seeing consistent problems. The pause stretched long enough that I could hear Sarah's labored breathing through the speaker. Customer complaints about front desk interactions have actually increased over the past 6 months. Guests reporting unprofessional attitudes, inappropriate personal conversations during check-in, and staff members who seem distracted or hostile during service interactions. That's not fair, Sarah protested. We deal with difficult people all the time. You can't judge our performance based on a few complaints from problem guests. A few complaints? I scrolled through the feedback database, counting incidents. Sarah, in the past 90 days alone, your name appears in 14 separate guest complaints. That's more than the rest of the front desk staff combined. I could hear David whispering urgently in the background, probably trying to signal Sarah to stop talking. The complaints follow a consistent pattern. Guests report feeling unwelcome, experiencing judgmental attitudes, and overhearing inappropriate conversations about personal topics during their interactions with front desk staff. People exaggerate when they're unhappy about something else. Do they? Because some of these complaints are quite specific, including direct quotes from conversations where front desk staff discussed family members who don't work real jobs and live off unearned money. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if they'd hung up. Sarah, are you there? I'm here. Good. Because I want to make sure you understand the position you've put yourself in. You've spent 3 years publicly criticizing your employer's work ethic and business practices. You've used your position at the hotel to share personal opinions about family members with paying customers. And you've done all of this while benefiting directly from the success of the investments you've been mocking. I opened the hotel's employee disciplinary procedures, reviewing the protocols for addressing unprofessional conduct and customer service failures. From a business perspective, this presents some interesting challenges. How do we maintain professional standards when employees are using their positions to advance personal agendas? How do we ensure customer satisfaction when staff members are more focused on sharing family gossip than providing quality service? Marcus, what are you saying? David's voice carried a note of desperation that suggested he understood exactly what I was saying. I'm saying that actions have consequences, David. Sarah has made it very clear that she doesn't respect the work I do or the value I bring to business operations. She's entitled to that opinion, of course. But expressing that opinion to hotel guests while representing my company crosses professional boundaries. I minimized the disciplinary procedures and opened a new email draft, addressing it to the hotel's general manager. The question now is whether Sarah's performance issues can be addressed through additional training and closer supervision, or whether we need to consider more dramatic changes to ensure consistent service quality. You can't fire me for having opinions about family members, Sarah said, her voice rising with something that might have been anger or panic. You're absolutely right, Sarah. I can't fire you for having opinions, but I can address performance issues, customer service failures, and unprofessional conduct that affects business operations. I began typing the email, documenting the pattern of complaints and the need for immediate performance review. The beauty of business ownership, Sarah, is that it provides clarity about priorities. Customer satisfaction comes first. Professional standards come second. Personal opinions and family drama come somewhere much further down the list. Marcus, please, David interrupted. Sarah made some mistakes tonight, but she's learned her lesson. Can't we find a way to work this out without involving her job? I paused my typing and considered his question seriously. That's an interesting proposition, David. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that family problems should stay in the family, David said carefully. Sarah got emotional about the wedding expenses, said some things she shouldn't have, but that doesn't mean her livelihood should be destroyed over it. I saved the draft email and leaned back in my chair, considering the weight of his words. Through my window, the Marriott sign continued its rhythmic flashing, a constant reminder of the power dynamics that had shifted so dramatically in the past hour. You know, David, that's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this situation in the first place. For 3 years, you've listened to Sarah explain to anyone who would listen that I'm basically a parasitic deadbeat. You've watched her use family gatherings as opportunities to educate people about my supposed character flaws and professional inadequacies. She was just venting frustrations. Everyone does that. Everyone doesn't do that to paying hotel customers, David. Everyone doesn't use their workplace as a platform for sharing personal grievances about family members. I opened Sarah's complete employment file, scrolling through performance reviews that painted a picture of someone who'd been coasting on adequate performance while her attitude problems festered beneath the surface. But let's talk about solutions, since you brought it up. What would constitute Sarah learning her lesson, in your opinion? David's relief was audible through the phone. She could apologize, sincerely, and maybe contribute more to Emma's wedding fund herself, show that she understands family responsibility works both ways. An apology? I repeated the words thoughtfully. For 3 years of public character assassination and 6 months of using my hotel to advance personal vendettas against my professional reputation. Marcus, I know it sounds inadequate when you put it that way, but it doesn't just sound inadequate, David. It is inadequate. Sarah didn't accidentally slip up tonight. She delivered a calculated attack on my character, my work ethic, and my value as a family member. That kind of sustained hostility doesn't develop overnight. I pulled up Sarah's social media profiles again, scrolling through months of thinly veiled references to family members who didn't understand real work or genuine responsibility. The apology would need to be as public as the criticism was, don't you think? If Sarah's going to acknowledge that she misjudged my professional situation, shouldn't that acknowledgement reach the same audience that heard her original assessments? What do you mean by public? Sarah's voice came through, tight with apprehension. Well, you've shared your opinions about my work ethic with hotel guests, family friends, people at Emma's school events, your social media followers. A private apology between family members wouldn't really address the scope of the damage, would it? I opened a new document and began outlining the parameters of what genuine accountability might look like. For instance, you could start with a Facebook post acknowledging that you were wrong about my professional situation. Tag the family members who've heard your theories over the years. Explain that you've learned I actually own the company that employs you. Marcus, that would be humiliating. Would it be more humiliating than spending 3 years calling your boss a financial parasite? The question hung in the air while I continued typing my outline. Then there's the matter of your customer service issues. 14 complaints in 90 days suggests a pattern that goes beyond tonight's revelations. You'd need to demonstrate measurable improvement in guest satisfaction scores. That's not fair. You can't hold me to impossible standards just because we had a family disagreement. I'm not holding you to impossible standards, Sarah. I'm holding you to the same standards we apply to every employee. The difference is that now you know who sets those standards. I opened the hotel's customer service training protocols, reviewing the modules that addressed professional conduct and appropriate workplace behavior. You'd need to complete additional customer service training. Demonstrate that you understand the difference between personal opinions and professional responsibilities. Show that you can separate family dynamics from business operations. Fine, Sarah said quickly. I'll do the training. I'll improve my customer service scores. Just please don't fire me over this. And then there's the matter of your contribution to Emma's wedding fund. I pulled up my personal banking interface, reviewing the account balances that Sarah had spent the evening questioning. You criticized my $2,000 contribution as inadequate for someone in my financial position. You suggested that real family members step up when it matters. So what would constitute stepping up from someone in your financial position? I don't have much extra money right now. The wedding expenses have been stretching us thin. How much extra money do you have, Sarah? Maybe a few $100s, $500 at most. I smiled, pulling up Sarah's employment records and calculating her annual salary against average living expenses for someone in her situation. $500? That's interesting, because according to your employment records, you earn $42,000 per year. David mentioned that you work double shifts regularly, which suggests overtime compensation on top of base salary. Most of that goes to rent and basic living expenses. Of course it does, just like most of my investment returns go to portfolio management and reinvestment strategies. But you criticized me for not contributing adequately from my available resources. I opened a calculator app and began running numbers. So if $500 represents your maximum available contribution and $2,000 represents my inadequate contribution, that suggests you believe you should contribute roughly 4 times more than I should, relative to our respective financial positions. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? You said real family members step up when it matters. You said people with actual money should share it with people who actually matter. By your own logic, you should be contributing every available dollar to Emma's future. The silence stretched long enough for me to complete my calculations. But let's be generous and say you contribute your full $500. That still leaves us with the question of what constitutes adequate contribution from someone in my position. I pulled up my investment portfolio summary, looking at the numbers that Sarah had spent 3 years speculating about. My liquid assets currently total approximately $43 million. That's not counting real estate holdings, business equity, or retirement accounts. Just immediately accessible investment funds. I could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath through the phone. So if we apply your logic about proportional family responsibility, my contribution should reflect the same percentage of available resources that yours does. Marcus, you don't need to prove anything with numbers. Don't I? You spent 20 minutes tonight explaining that numbers are exactly how family responsibility should be measured. You criticized my contribution as inadequate for someone in my financial position. I opened my banking app and navigated to the account I used for charitable contributions and family gifts. $500 represents roughly 1.2% of your annual income. Applied to my situation, 1.2% of available liquid assets would be approximately $516,000. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. $516,000. That's what your logic suggests would constitute appropriate family contribution from someone in my financial position. That's insane, Sarah whispered. Is it? Because an hour ago you were arguing that I was being selfish and cheap by not contributing enough. You said real men take care of their families when it matters. I began transferring funds between accounts, setting up the payment structure for what was about to become a very expensive lesson in family dynamics. But you know what, Sarah? You're absolutely right about family responsibility. Emma deserves to have the wedding she wants without her parents going into debt. David works 60 hours a week at construction sites. You work double shifts at a hotel. You shouldn't have to choose between Emma's happiness and your own financial stability. Marcus, what are you doing? I'm taking care of my family, Sarah, just like you suggested I should. I completed the fund transfer and opened my email client, drafting a message to Emma's wedding planner. I'm going to pay for Emma's entire wedding. Venue, dress, flowers, photographer, catering, music, everything on her wish list, plus a few extras she probably hasn't thought of yet. The whole wedding? David's voice carried disbelief in something that might have been relief. The whole wedding, plus a $20,000 honeymoon package to wherever she and her fiancé want to go. Consider it my contribution to family happiness and her future financial security. I could hear muffled conversation in the background, probably David trying to process this unexpected turn of events. But there's one condition, Sarah. What condition? You're going to personally deliver the news to Emma. You're going to explain that Uncle Marcus is paying for her dream wedding because he believes in taking care of family when it matters. That's generous of you, Marcus, really generous. I'm not finished. You're also going to explain to Emma exactly how Uncle Marcus can afford to be this generous. You're going to tell her about the software company I built and sold, about the investment portfolio I've spent 3 years managing, about the hotels and office buildings and apartment complexes I own across 4 states. I opened Emma's contact information and began drafting a message about wedding budget expansion. You're going to explain that Uncle Marcus isn't a deadbeat living off inheritance money. He's a successful businessman who retired early because he built something valuable and sold it for enough money to support his family's dreams for generations. Marcus, I understand what you're trying to do, but I'm not trying to do anything, Sarah. I'm doing it. You spent 3 years educating people about my supposed character flaws and professional inadequacies. Now you get to spend however long it takes educating them about the truth. I attached the wedding budget summary to my email and sent it to Emma's planner, copying Emma on the message. Hey, and Sarah, this conversation has been incredibly educational for me too. I've learned that you think family responsibility should be measured in dollars and cents, that real men prove their worth through financial contributions to other people's dreams. That's not exactly what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, and you know what? You're right. Money does talk, Sarah. It says things about priorities and values and what people actually believe matters in life. I opened my laptop's audio recording software and began setting up a new file. So let me tell you what my money is saying right now. It's saying that Emma deserves a perfect wedding regardless of what her parents can afford. It's saying that family conflicts shouldn't interfere with a young woman's happiness on the most important day of her life. That's beautiful, Marcus, really thoughtful. But my money is also saying something else, Sarah. It's saying that actions have consequences, and people who spend years attacking someone's character and professional reputation shouldn't be surprised when that someone has more power to respond than they anticipated. I could hear Sarah's breathing change, becoming more rapid and shallow. What do you mean? Beidou. I mean that tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up knowing that your employer is someone you've spent 3 years publicly disrespecting. You're going to go to work knowing that every customer complaint about your attitude lands on the desk of someone who's heard you mock his work ethic and business acumen. I pulled up the hotel's staffing schedule, noting that Sarah was scheduled for a double shift this weekend. You're going to interact with guests knowing that inappropriate conversations about family members or personal financial situations will be reported directly to someone who takes customer satisfaction very seriously. Marcus, please don't make my job situation worse than it already is. I'm not making anything worse, Sarah. I'm simply making the existing situation more transparent. You've always been accountable to your employer for your performance and professionalism. The only thing that's changed is that now you know who your employer actually is. I opened the hotel's employee scheduling system and began reviewing Sarah's upcoming shifts. Her weekend double shifts suddenly took on new significance when viewed through the lens of our recent conversation. You know what's particularly interesting about tomorrow, Sarah? According to your schedule, you're working the morning shift when our corporate inspection team arrives for their quarterly review. The sharp intake of breath through the phone told me she understood the implications immediately. Corporate inspections are routine, of course. We evaluate everything from customer service standards to facility maintenance to staff performance metrics. Nothing you haven't dealt with before. I scrolled through the inspection checklist, noting the sections that focused specifically on guest interaction quality and professional conduct standards. The inspectors will be conducting random guest interviews, reviewing recent feedback forms, and observing staff interactions throughout their stay. Standard procedure for maintaining our hospitality standards. Marcus, you can't use corporate inspections to target me personally. Target you? I pulled up the inspection criteria, all of which had been established long before tonight's conversation. Sarah, these are the same professional standards we apply to every employee at every property. Customer satisfaction, professional demeanor, appropriate workplace behavior. I could hear David whispering urgently in the background again, probably trying to coach Sarah through this minefield she'd created for herself. The inspection team will be staying at the hotel for 3 days, conducting comprehensive evaluations of all departments. They'll be checking in tomorrow morning at exactly 9:15, which puts them at your front desk station right at the start of your shift. That's just a coincidence. Is it? Because according to my calendar, I scheduled this inspection 6 weeks ago, long before tonight's enlightening conversation about my work ethic and professional contributions. I opened the inspection team's travel itinerary, reviewing their planned activities and evaluation criteria. They'll be posing as regular guests, of course, business travelers who expect professional service and courteous interactions, the kind of travelers who notice when front desk staff seem distracted or hostile during check-in procedures. I can handle corporate inspections. I've been doing this job for 5 years. Have you? Because your employment records show you were hired in March 2019, which makes it closer to 4 years. But who's counting? I pulled up Sarah's hiring documentation, noting the discrepancies between her claimed experience and her actual employment history. Although I suppose when you're used to exaggerating details about family members' professional situations, inflating your own work experience comes naturally. That's not fair. 1 year doesn't make a significant difference. Doesn't it? Because in business, accuracy matters, details matter. When employees can't keep basic facts straight about their own employment history, it raises questions about their attention to other professional responsibilities. I opened a new email draft, this one addressed to the hotel's Human Resources Department. For instance, your job application claimed previous hospitality experience at 2 other properties. But when we called those references during your hiring process, neither property had any record of your employment. The silence stretched long enough for me to review Sarah's complete employment file, including the background check discrepancies that had been noted but overlooked during the hiring process. Apparently, the hiring manager at the time decided to give you the benefit of the doubt, assumed there might have been record-keeping issues at your previous employers, extended you professional courtesy based on your interview performance. I don't remember exactly what I put on that application. Of course you don't. Just like you don't remember exactly what you've been telling hotel guests about family members who don't work real jobs. I began typing the HR email, documenting the pattern of factual inconsistencies and professional conduct issues that had emerged over Sarah's employment tenure. But memory problems aside, tomorrow's inspection will give you an opportunity to demonstrate the customer service excellence we expect from all our front desk staff. What kind of opportunity? The inspection team will be evaluating how well our staff handle challenging situations, difficult guests, complex requests, high-pressure interactions where professionalism really matters. I pulled up the inspection scenario guidelines, reviewing the various tests that would be conducted throughout the 3-day evaluation period. For example, one inspector will pose as an extremely demanding business traveler. Multiple room change requests, complaints about amenities, unreasonable expectations about service timing. The kind of guest who tests whether staff can maintain courtesy under pressure. I deal with difficult people all the time. Do you? Because according to recent complaint patterns, your usual approach involves becoming defensive and argumentative when guests express dissatisfaction with service quality. I opened the specific complaint reports that detailed Sarah's interactions with challenging customers over the past few months. Guest feedback suggests you take criticism personally rather than addressing it professionally. Comments about unprofessional attitudes when handling service recovery situations. People complain about everything. You can't judge my performance based on a few negative reviews from impossible customers. A few negative reviews? I scrolled through the complaint database, counting incidents that specifically mentioned Sarah's defensive responses to guest concerns. Sarah, in the hospitality industry, every negative review represents multiple unreported dissatisfied customers. I opened the customer service recovery protocols, reviewing the procedures Sarah should have been following during difficult interactions. For every guest who takes the time to file a formal complaint, industry research suggests 10 to 15 others simply check out early or choose different accommodations for future visits. That's not my fault if people are unreasonable. Isn't it? Because professional hospitality service means anticipating guest needs, managing expectations, and turning potential complaints into positive experiences through proactive problem solving. I pulled up the hotel's training materials on service recovery and conflict de-escalation, noting which modules Sarah had completed and which ones she'd been scheduled to repeat. Tomorrow's inspection will include multiple scenarios designed to test exactly those skills. How staff handle unreasonable requests, manage frustrated guests, and maintain professional composure when personal buttons get pushed. The silence that followed suggested Sarah was beginning to understand the scope of the professional challenges she'd be facing in less than 12 hours. But you know what's really fascinating about tomorrow's timing? The inspection team specifically requested to observe our busiest operational periods: Friday morning check-ins, weekend event coordination, high-volume guest services. I can handle busy periods. Can you? Because your performance reviews consistently note struggles with multitasking under pressure and maintaining quality standards during peak operational times. I opened Sarah's quarterly evaluations, reviewing the recurring themes about time management and stress responses during demanding shifts. Multiple supervisors have documented instances where you become overwhelmed during busy periods, leading to mistakes in guest services and conflicts with other staff members. Everyone gets stressed during rush times. Everyone doesn't respond to stress by taking frustrations out on guests and coworkers, Sarah. Professional hospitality workers develop coping strategies and support systems that maintain service quality regardless of operational pressure. I pulled up the hotel's employee assistance resources, noting the stress management training sessions that Sarah had been encouraged to attend but never completed. Tomorrow's inspection will evaluate not just individual performance, but team collaboration during high-pressure situations. How staff support each other, communicate effectively, and maintain unified service standards. The other front desk staff will help if I need support. Will they? Because according to internal feedback from your colleagues, you've developed a reputation for creating additional stress during busy periods rather than contributing to team solutions. I opened the peer evaluation reports that were collected annually as part of performance reviews, noting the consistent themes about Sarah's impact on team dynamics. Comments about negative attitudes affecting team morale, resistance to collaborative problem-solving, and tendency to blame others when service issues arise. That's not fair. Internal politics always get complicated in workplace situations. Internal politics? I reviewed the specific incidents that had been documented by multiple supervisors over Sarah's employment tenure. Sarah, these aren't political disagreements. These are professional conduct issues that affect customer service quality and team effectiveness. I minimized the peer evaluations and opened the hotel's progressive discipline policy, reviewing the steps that led from verbal warnings to termination. For instance, the incident last month where you argued with a guest about our cancellation policy in front of other customers waiting in the lobby. That guest was trying to get out of legitimate charges. That guest was a corporate traveler whose company books over 200 room nights per year at our property, a relationship worth approximately $80,000 in annual revenue. I pulled up the corporate account information, showing the booking history and revenue impact of the relationship Sarah had damaged through her confrontational approach. After your public argument about policy enforcement, that company moved their regular bookings to our competitor across the street. $80,000 in lost revenue because you decided to make a point about rule adherence instead of finding a solution that satisfied everyone. I was following company policy. You were following the letter of policy while completely ignoring its spirit. Hospitality service means finding ways to say yes to guest needs, not finding reasons to say no. I opened the service recovery training materials that addressed exactly this type of situation, noting the multiple solutions Sarah could have offered instead of creating a public confrontation. You could have offered a partial refund, future stay credit, room upgrade on their next visit, or any number of alternatives that would have maintained the relationship while addressing their concerns. I didn't have authority to make those kinds of adjustments. You had authority to escalate to a manager who did have that authority. Instead, you chose to engage in a debate about policy interpretation with a valuable customer in front of other guests. I pulled up the incident report that had been filed after the confrontation, noting the witness statements from other guests who had observed the unprofessional interaction. 3 separate guests mentioned the incident in their feedback forms. Comments about uncomfortable atmosphere in the lobby, concerns about staff training and customer service standards. People always exaggerate when they write complaint forms. Do they exaggerate security camera footage, Sarah? Because we have video of the entire interaction, including your body language, tone of voice, and the guests' increasingly frustrated responses to your inflexibility. The mention of video evidence seemed to drain whatever remaining confidence Sarah had been clinging to during our conversation. Tomorrow's inspection team will have access to all incident reports, video footage, and guest feedback from the past 6 months. They'll be evaluating not just current performance, but patterns of behavior that affect our property's reputation and guest satisfaction scores. Marcus, what do you want from me? The question hung in the air while I considered how to respond. Through my window, the Marriott's neon sign continued its rhythmic flashing, a constant reminder of the power I held over Sarah's professional future. What I want, Sarah, is for you to understand that actions have consequences. You spent 3 years attacking my character and professional reputation while benefiting from my business success. You used your workplace as a platform for sharing personal grievances with paying customers. I opened my laptop's calendar and began blocking out time for tomorrow's inspection oversight. Now you get to experience what it feels like when someone with actual authority evaluates your professional performance and personal conduct. Are you going to fire me? I'm going to let your work speak for itself, Sarah. Tomorrow's inspection will evaluate your customer service skills, professional demeanor, and ability to represent our brand standards effectively. I pulled up the evaluation criteria that would determine Sarah's employment future, reviewing each metric that would be measured during the 3-day assessment period. If you can demonstrate the hospitality excellence we expect from all our staff, if you can maintain professional composure under pressure, if you can contribute positively to team dynamics and guest satisfaction, then you'll continue working at our property. And if I can't? Then you'll learn firsthand what it feels like when someone decides you're not contributing enough value to justify your position. I could hear Sarah's labored breathing through the phone, the sound of someone finally understanding the stakes of the game she'd been playing. But you know what's really interesting about tomorrow, Sarah? I'll be observing the inspection personally, sitting in the lobby, watching how our front desk staff interact with guests, taking notes on service quality and professional standards. You're going to be there? I'm going to be everywhere, Sarah. In the lobby during check-in rush, in the restaurant during breakfast service, in the business center during peak usage hours, observing, evaluating, making sure our guests receive the level of service they deserve from every employee. I opened the property management app on my phone, setting up real-time notifications for guest feedback and staff performance alerts. And every interaction you have with guests will be observed by someone who's heard your opinions about family members who don't work real jobs and don't contribute meaningfully to society. Marcus, please. I understand now that I was wrong about your situation. Can't we find a way to move forward without destroying my career? Your career isn't being destroyed, Sarah. It's being evaluated according to the same professional standards we apply to every employee at every property I own. I minimized the management app and opened my investment portfolio, looking at the dozens of hospitality properties where similar standards were enforced daily. The difference is that now you know who sets those standards, and you understand that your job performance directly impacts the success of businesses owned by someone you've spent 3 years publicly disrespecting. I'll do better. I'll improve my customer service scores, complete additional training, whatever it takes to meet your expectations. Our expectations, Sarah, these aren't personal standards I'm imposing because of family conflicts. These are professional hospitality standards that exist at every quality property in our portfolio. I pulled up the company-wide performance metrics, showing Sarah how her scores compared to staff at similar properties across our hospitality network. Your customer satisfaction ratings rank in the bottom 15% of front desk staff across all our properties. Your peer collaboration scores are even lower. Your professional development completion rate is the worst in your employment classification. The numbers painted a clear picture of someone who'd been coasting on minimal acceptable performance, while more serious issues festered beneath the surface. So tomorrow's inspection isn't about punishing you for family disagreements, Sarah. It's about determining whether you can meet the professional standards that our guests deserve and our business model requires. What happens if I fail the inspection? I opened the Termination Procedures Manual, reviewing the documentation requirements for employment separation based on performance deficiencies. Then you'll have an opportunity to explore other career options that might be better suited to your interpersonal style and professional priorities. You mean you'll fire me? I mean the continued employment depends on demonstrated ability to perform essential job functions at acceptable quality levels. Same as any other workplace, Sarah. I could hear muffled conversation in the background, David probably trying to process the full scope of what Sarah had unleashed with her character assassination campaign. But here's what I find most fascinating about this entire situation. You spent tonight lecturing me about family responsibility, real work, and contributing meaningfully to society. I was wrong about all of that. Were you wrong, or were you just uninformed? Because there's a difference between making honest mistakes and making calculated attacks based on assumptions you never bothered to verify. I opened Sarah's social media profiles again, scrolling through months of posts that revealed a pattern of judgment and criticism extending far beyond our family dynamics. Your Facebook timeline shows a consistent pattern of commentary about people who don't work hard enough, don't contribute enough, don't understand real responsibility. This wasn't just about me, Sarah. This was about your worldview. Everyone vents frustrations on social media sometimes. Everyone doesn't use their workplace to advance those frustrations with paying customers, Sarah. Everyone doesn't turn family grievances into customer service issues that affect business operations. I pulled up the guest feedback reports that mentioned inappropriate personal conversations with front desk staff, noting the impact on overall property ratings and guest satisfaction scores. Your personal opinions about family members became business liabilities when you shared them with hotel guests. Your character judgments affected our property's reputation when you expressed them during professional interactions. I never meant for personal feelings to affect my work performance. Intent doesn't matter when the results damage customer relationships and property reputation, Sarah. Professional responsibility means maintaining appropriate boundaries between personal opinions and workplace conduct. I opened the employee handbook section that addressed exactly these types of professional boundary violations, noting the clear policies Sarah had repeatedly ignored. Tomorrow's inspection will evaluate whether you understand those boundaries and can maintain them under pressure, whether you can separate personal feelings from professional responsibilities when it actually matters. I understand now. I'll keep personal issues completely separate from work interactions. Will you? Because understanding policy and implementing it consistently under stress are completely different skills, Sarah. Tomorrow we'll test whether you've actually learned from these mistakes or whether you've just learned to say the right things when your job is threatened. The distinction was crucial, and I suspected Sarah was beginning to understand the difference between superficial compliance and genuine professional development. Either way, tomorrow should be very educational for both of us. The morning sun cast long shadows across downtown Minneapolis as I sat in the Marriott's lobby at exactly 8:45, positioned where I could observe every interaction at the front desk. My coffee steamed in its ceramic cup while I pretended to read the Wall Street Journal, though my attention was entirely focused on the woman behind the reception counter who had no idea her boss was watching her every move. Sarah arrived at 8:53, 7 minutes before her shift officially began. I noted the time in my leather portfolio, along with her appearance and demeanor. She looked tired, stressed, her usually perfect makeup slightly smudged around the eyes. The kind of exhaustion that comes from spending a sleepless night contemplating the destruction of everything you thought you understood about your life. She moved through her opening procedures with mechanical precision, checking the computer system, reviewing overnight notes, preparing registration materials for the morning rush. Professional competence masking personal turmoil, exactly the kind of performance that would be tested severely over the next 3 days. At 9:10, the first inspector arrived, James Morrison from our corporate evaluation team, posing as a demanding business traveler with an early check-in request and specific room requirements. I watched Sarah's face as he approached the desk, noting the slight tightening around her eyes when he began explaining his needs in the entitled tone that separated truly professional hospitality workers from those who took customer demands personally. "I need a corner suite on the 15th floor or higher," Morrison announced, his voice carrying the impatience of someone accustomed to having his requirements met immediately. "I have client calls scheduled throughout the day, and I cannot have noise disruptions from adjacent rooms or street traffic. Sarah's fingers hesitated over the keyboard for just a moment too long. I could see her processing the request against available inventory, calculating whether to offer alternatives or explain limitations. The critical moment where professional service either flourished or crumbled under pressure. "Let me check our availability for you," she replied, her voice maintaining courtesy despite the visible tension in her shoulders. A promising start, though the real test would come when Morrison escalated his demands beyond reasonable accommodation. I sipped my coffee and continued my observation, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether Sarah possessed the professional resilience to separate personal stress from customer service excellence, or whether 3 years of entitled attitudes would finally catch up with her career prospects. The game had begun, and Sarah had no idea how many people were watching her play. So there I sat, watching 3 days of professional evaluation unfold like a masterclass in consequences. Sarah passed her inspection, barely, improving her customer service scores just enough to keep her job while learning exactly what it meant to work under the watchful eye of someone she'd spent years underestimating. Emma's wedding was everything a young woman could dream of, paid for in full by the uncle her stepmother had called a deadbeat financial parasite. And David? Well, David learned the difference between keeping the peace and enabling cruelty. The most satisfying part wasn't watching Sarah struggle through corporate inspections or seeing her Facebook apology go viral among our family and friends. It wasn't even the look on her face when Emma thanked Uncle Marcus for making her dream wedding possible while explaining exactly how successful her uncle really was. The most satisfying part was the silence that followed. No more commentary about my work ethic. No more theories about my financial situation shared with hotel guests. No more lectures about real men and real responsibilities. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone's life. Sometimes it's simply letting them discover that the person they've been attacking has more power than they ever imagined. Sarah kept her job, but she'll spend every shift knowing that her boss is someone she publicly disrespected for years. She'll interact with every guest knowing that inappropriate conversations could cost her career instantly. And she'll wake up every morning understanding that actions have consequences, even when you think nobody important is listening. Family responsibility, it turns out, works both ways. And now everybody knows exactly who in this family actually understands what that means.